Iraqi warplanes bomb ISIS militants' positions in the northeastern city of Tal Afar as Kurdish troops recapture the eastern side of the Mosul Dam. The Syrian army launches a wide-scale operation against al-Qaeda-affiliated groups in the Qalamun region, killing and injuring scores. And Palestinian and Israeli delegations return to Cairo to continue indirect talks in an effort to reach a long-term ceasefire agreement. This is Al-Ittijah World News. I'm Zainab Ali. The Iraqi Air Force has bombed a militant position in the northwestern city of Tal Afar, killing at least 17 extremists. One of the targeted militants was a high-ranking member of the so-called Islamic State. The raid was carried out in the Nineveh province amid an all-out offensive against the al-Qaeda-linked group, which launched its expansion bid in June. Iraqi Kurdish troops backed by U.S. warplanes have recaptured the eastern side of the Mosul Dam after an operation was launched earlier in the day. Peshmerga forces lost control of the dam on August 7 after Islamic State militants swept across the region, seizing key infrastructures such as oil fields. The dam on the Tigris River on the southern shores of Mosul Lake is nearly about 50 kilometers north of the city, provides electricity to much of the region, and is crucial to irrigation and vast farming areas in Nineveh province. Well, the 15-member United Nations Security Council has unanimously passed a resolution aimed at weakening the Islamic State, an al-Qaeda offshoot group that has seized swaths of territory in both Iraq and Syria and declared its own caliphate.
Will those in favour of the draft resolution contained in S/2014/589 please raise their hand?
In a strong show of arms, the United Nations Security Council unanimously supported the sternest resolution yet to deal with the horrendous acts of the Islamic State extremist militants in Iraq and Syria.
This resolution does four things. It sends a strong and clear political message to the terrorists and those who support them. Secondly, it focuses on important practical measures, choking off recruitment, and in particular the supply of foreign fighters. And thirdly, it tackles the funding and financing of these terrorist groups. And lastly, it applies sanctions to 6 individual terrorists and their key financial backers.
However, the resolution contains little action to actually stop the spread of IS butchery and terrorism in the region, as the British ambassador to the UN, Mark Lyle Grant, later explained.
No, it doesn't authorise military action. There is no need for a resolution to authorise military action.
While members of the UN Security Council work through their own elements, IS are also surging ahead with their expansion in Iraq, carrying out gruesome crimes against anyone who opposes them. The Islamic State, an al-Qaeda splinter group, formerly known as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, has long been blacklisted by the UN Security Council. The militants captured the northern city of Mosul and made a swift and brutal push towards Baghdad in June. But it was the offensive into Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region last week which sparked the New York-based council to act.
We have to be very cautious about the American support in Iraq because it's coming for one faction and it's coming to the Kurd at the expense of the security of Iraq. Obviously, the Iraqi government demanded and bought weapons but hasn't been delivered, but it's coming to the Kurd.
Over 1 million Iraqis have fled their homes, while those who remain are living in terror, with many not expecting much will change as a result of this latest UN Security Council resolution.
Political analyst Mudhar Al-Khairullah says that this resolution by the UNSC is merely a face-saving strategy by the West after it dragged its feet at the beginning of this crisis.
I think the procrastination that we've seen from the United Nations, along with many countries within the Western world, is frankly despicable. They knew that we had a cancer that was aggressive at an early stage. We basically waited and watched this cancer spread to other organs before we suggested intervention. And the United Nations even have named individuals who are known through intelligence that they have been supporting this terrorist regime. Yet they just watched and waited until the cancer has spread into all types of different organs. When you treat cancer like the Islamic State as a terrorist organization, you need to be really aggressive. And it's not just enough to give it some treatment such as freezing a few assets or travel bans. It needs radical intervention. You need to basically take it out altogether. When we've seen Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has taken power now in Iraq, we have a new milestone where neighboring countries, including Saudi, Qatar, and Turkey, have come united alongside Iran and the United States in expressing their support in order to help them rebuild the country and fight the Islamic State. So I'm hoping that the Secretary General's comment on unity among Middle Eastern states should now be clear for everyone. It is the only way forward to defeat ISIS. The United States have put their own political and economic interests first and before any humanitarian cause or genocide that may occur. I think that has been sad for everybody to see, but this is unfortunately the reality that we live in. So to a certain extent, the Secretary General's comments are accurate in that sense. We know that a lot of these countries get involved within these regions that are full of conflict for their own personal gains. But the only way that they can justify intervention is by giving it the humanitarian twist.
Militants from the so-called Islamic State have massacred around 80 Iraqis from the Yazidi minority group in a northern village, as extremist attacks in the country continue to surge.
Trapped on Mount Sinjar, a valley of death awaited these Yazidis. Members of the religious minority group have been fenced in by the so-called Islamic State militants, who have shown no mercy to Iraqis. Extremist militants have massacred around 80 people in the northern Iraqi village of Kocho, most of them belonging to the Yazidi community. Yazidi and Kurdish officials confirmed the systematic killings in the northern parts of the country, which had fallen into the hands of al-Qaeda-linked extremists. Armed men invaded Kocho near Mount Sinjar after a week-long siege. The group had ordered the residents of the village to convert to Islam or face the death penalty, allegedly applying the Sharia law. While the men were executed, reports said the women were captured and taken to an unknown location.
We were on the mountain for 8 days. We had nothing to eat. We thought we would either die or leave the mountain. We had nothing to eat. We left and they attacked us with bullets.
This deadly attack brings the number of Yazidis killed by IS militants since their expansion bid began to at least 500. Extremist violence has also triggered a wave of refugees. Thousands of Yazidis have been forced to flee their homes and poured into the northern Kurdistan region, with fears of a humanitarian crisis lingering.
Children died in their hundreds on the mountain. No assistance. The planes brought assistance once or twice and throw it down.
I saw 4 old people who remained on the mountain, which was like a hell. There was no water or anything else. As I went by, I saw with my own eyes old people dying there. My own mother died on that mountain.
Reached safety, and we helped save many innocent lives.
Just on Friday, U.S. President Barack Obama canceled plans to evacuate Yazidis trapped on Mount Sinjar, claiming they are no longer in danger. But this carnage has proved Obama wrong and could only be the beginning of a more gruesome fate for Iraq's ethnic minorities.
German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier has visited refugees displaced by the so-called Islamic State in the northern Kurdistan region. Steinmeier, who supervised the first shipment of German aid to Iraqi refugees, is in the middle of a visit to Iraq for talks with government officials over the country's security crisis. Before going to Erbil, the German FM landed in Baghdad, where he met with Prime Minister-designate Haider al-Abadi. As Western powers have rushed to voice their support for the Peshmerga forces to fend off Islamic State attacks on Iraqi Kurdish territory, Iraqis are dismayed by the double standard policies led by the U.S. and its allies, as extremists continue to wreak havoc across the country.
While Iraq has been wrecked by a string of violence mounted by Islamic State terrorists, the international community did not make any reaction to support the Iraq government in tackling the ruthlessness of the foreign-backed group. According to UN figures, more than 1,700 civilians have been killed in July alone, and around 500,000 religious minorities have been forced to flee their towns and villages as a result of IS brutality in western and northwestern Iraq. Yet, neither the US nor EU countries have offered any support to Iraq government to address the deteriorated humanitarian situation or provide military support to help the Iraqi security forces fighting the so-called IS group. However, the US administration rushed to conduct airstrikes on Islamic State targets to vanquish any potential attack that can threaten Kurdish territories. Similar stances have been deliberated by France, Britain, and other EU countries to provide quick humanitarian aids to the displaced people and to arm the Kurdish troops with advanced weapons. The different stances taken by US and EU countries in dealing with Iraq's crisis provoke a prospect that these countries want to create an equivalent power to that of the central government in Baghdad with the aim of establishing a Kurdish state. Most global powers have an inclination to arm Kurdish troops in the expanse of the Iraqi army. That means these countries is dealing with Kurdistan as an independent part, and that will eventually lead to create a Kurdish state that will raise on the rubble of Iraq. Nevertheless, many believe that the United States and major global powers will not do much for neither the central government nor to the Kurdish region. The limited airstrikes conducted by US Air Force or the non-lethal weapons shipment will not do much to the KRG to eliminate IS militants or to take back Mosul and other areas. If the central government and the KRG want to expel IS, then they should join hands to do so. Despite the international inaction towards the ongoing crisis, the Iraqi security forces managed to expel IS terrorists from most parts of Anbar and Salahuddin provinces, and now are providing air support to Peshmerga units to help them push back IS members who are threatening the Kurdish region's stability. Mustafa Al-Qattan, Al-Ittijah, Baghdad.
And Iraqis are deeply divided on interpreting why former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki dropped his bid to stay in power earlier this week. Here's our Baghdad correspondent Rihab al-Rikabi that spoke to citizens who expressed their mixed feelings on this unprecedented political transition.
The latest key developments on the Iraqi political ground, capped by the departure of the outgoing Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, who was determined to remain for another 4-year term in power, have triggered conflicting reactions among Iraqi people. Some saw the resignation of Nouri al-Maliki as a dynamic approach to peaceful power transition that will boost the country's fledgling democracy and will bring about a true democratic reform.
The latest change in Iraq's political arena came as a result of wise moves from al-Marja'iyya and the political blocs, and we hope that the democratic process in the country moves smoothly in accordance with the political program of the new Prime Minister designate Haider al-Abadi for eternally tackling the extremist militants threat. The withdrawal of Mr. Maliki was respectful, and all Iraqis appreciate his peaceful initiative to step down for the sake of the Iraqi people who suffered a lot, and such change in the power will definitely rush the country towards a crucial progress in the upcoming days.
Others shared the view that such political change was prompted by intensified international and domestic pressures on Iraq's political leaders to establish a broader inclusive government. Yet they seem to realize that such intervention would solidify the political process in the country and lead the country towards a genuine political solution to the ongoing crisis.
The key positions have been filled due to growing internal and international pressure. However, such intervention came in the favor of Iraqi people and the political process in Iraq, as any change is required today after the executive and legislative systems have been hit by long-standing paralysis that fueled the militancy in much parts of the country.
Being strongly endorsed by Iraq's highest religious authority, most political factions, the United States plus Western and regional powers, especially the Gulf states, who were not in agreement with al-Maliki, many say that al-Maliki's successor, Premier Designate Haider al-Abadi, has better chances today to stand with the country firm in the face of the militancy and corruption.
For democratic consolidation to occur and thrive in Iraq, many say that the process of power transition will be embroiled in a protracted political and ideological conflict. And it may not be that easy for the new government to counter the militant offensive and knit the country back together in the near future. But efforts towards substantial stability have already begun, and this is where Iraqis' corporate hopes should anchor. بحاب ركابي الاتجاه بغداد.
The Syrian army has launched an operation to counter foreign-backed militants in the mountainous Qalamun region, namely in the town of Flita, following intelligence reports citing possible security threats to the region. The operation targeted militants belonging to the so-called Al-Nusra Front and several other Islamist groups, killing and injuring scores of militants. Government forces secured the main highways connecting towns in the Qalamun and thwarted countless infiltration attempts by the extremist groups into army checkpoints. And following the recent militant setbacks in the province of Aleppo, namely in the Sheikh Najjar area, foreign-backed extremist groups have launched a campaign to assert control over the western parts of the governorate. The Syrian army, however, has once again repelled the attacks, killing scores of Islamist militants, and launched a counter-operation targeting their hideouts in the neighborhoods of Hanano, Sakhur, and Bab al-Hadid. And staying in Syria, Islamic State fighters have killed more than 700 members of the Shaitaj tribe in the country's eastern province of Deir ez-Zur in 2 weeks. Among the killed were 100 fighters, but the rest were civilians. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported the killings took place in the Granij, Abu Hamam and Kashkiya villages of Deir ez-Zur, adding that the fate of 1,800 other members of the tribe was unknown. Now, crucial indirect negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis, which is mediated by the Egyptians, will resume on Sunday in Cairo, as the new 72-hour truce between the Palestinian resistance groups and the Israeli war machine ends on Monday.
Palestinian and Israeli negotiators are set to resume indirect talks with Egyptian mediators on reaching a more permanent ceasefire before a current truce expires at midnight on Monday. Egyptian authorities persuaded both sides late Wednesday to adhere to a new 5-day ceasefire, extending an earlier 3-day agreement in order to allow more time to thresh out a long-lasting truce. Today marked the 6th day of cautious calm, following more than a month of a brutal Israeli onslaught on the besieged Gaza Strip, which killed more than 1,960 Palestinians, most of whom were civilians. Palestinian and Israeli negotiating teams are now expected back in Cairo for fresh talks, which the Palestinians said would begin on Sunday after consulting their political leaders over the weekend. Hamas spokesman in Gaza, Sami Abu Zuhri, stressed that the ball is in the Israelis' court, adding that the Palestinian factions are prepared for any possibility and are adamant that their demands are unnegotiable. The main Palestinian demand is for a years-long crippling Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip to be lifted. For their part, the Israelis, who were struck with more than 2,790 retaliatory rocket attacks since July 8, are demanding the disarmament of the resistance groups in Gaza, a condition that has been categorically rejected by the Palestinians. The tense calm between the Palestinians of Gaza and the Israelis continues, but whether this calm would continue depends on the fierce negotiations set to be held in Cairo.
And to get some more analysis on this, we have political analyst Suhail Al-Natour. Dr. Al-Natour, good to have you with us today. Are you optimistic that an agreement will be reached in Cairo?
Well, it seems that the principle of continuing the negotiation until now is empowering slowly on the two sides, on the Israeli side and the Palestinians. It doesn't seem until now that there are any hawkish tendency to go back to the fight, unless, at least for the Palestinians, unless if the Israelis are camouflaging their bad intentions about continuing that, and considering that the Palestinians paid a lot of pain in this heroic stand, probably the Israelis will make the mistake to go back. But let's see it clearly. Both sides are in a position that they want some peace for a while at least. And the Egyptian negotiator is trying to accommodate the things between the two lists of demands. When the Israelis are trying to get something very big from the Palestinians to say to their people that they won by bringing or taking all the arms of the Palestinians out of the battle. And this is illusional because the Palestinians are pushing this subject out of discussion. But at least they can say that we Palestinians, we want the freedom of the movement and the finish of the blockade on Gaza. It seems that the Egyptians, by the proposal given yesterday to the Palestinians and to the Israelis, is trying to make it something win-win on the Palestinian side, on the Israeli side. We didn't hear yet the Palestinian last stand in common, but we hear from different organizations that they are not going to be withdrawing from their aim is to bring peace, real peace to Gaza and finish with the blockade and the continuity of life with guarantee that there is no more invasion on the land of Gaza.
Is Egypt really the right mediator in these negotiations? I mean, considering their hostile stance towards Hamas and just the fact that they won't even open the Rafah border crossing to get the necessities to the people of Gaza.
Well, if we notice that the Egyptians smoothed a little bit on the Rafah cross by allowing a lot of wounded people and needed people to go through Egypt on an average, but it's still under complete control because this is one of the pressures cards on the Palestinians to continue negotiation and not to be so stuffed. Egyptians, they want to reach some agreement and then to be the main country which is covering both sides, not only the Egypt this time is not playing only on favor of the Palestinians. They are trying to be so-called mediator between the two sides. I think that the Palestinians, because they need the pacification for their people, they'll accept some kind of offering from the Egyptians, but they are not going to accept everything, indirectly leading to give concessions on the main things. One of the examples is about the people on the borders. Israel is forbidding the Palestinians to reach the borders from 500 meters. It seems the Egyptians, they want not to completely accept the Palestinian demand by stopping the Israelis to forbid the agriculture workers to go to their land in the frontiers, to say that we can make it on two steps, for example. The first time from these 500 meters eliminated by Israel, 300 meters for the first time will be allow the Palestinians to go back with the complete security and spreading the army of the Mr. Abu Mazen on the borders. Then the Israelis will allow the 200 meters. So it seems something like this. The Israelis would accept it if it's on long interval in order to say that we are, as they said it and they pretended, that they are not against the Palestinians, but they are against one group. They want to give something as demonstrating that they are against one group, not all the Palestinians.
Okay, now if the Israelis refuse to compromise, if they refuse to make concessions, where do we go from here?
Well, I think there will be in this possibility a kind of slow level of military attrition for a long time until the Israelis change, because the Palestinians are asking for the minimal things of human rights by every law, by every chart all over the humanity. So we're not asking to liberate completely Palestine now. We are asking to allow the people to live in dignity like any other in his own country and on his territory. So the Israelis must change, but the Israeli public is demonstrating that they are going to the extreme right, thinking themselves with the illusion of their media and the Western media also, that they tapped brutally on the Palestinians. When they see the destruction, they consider that the Palestinians will be fearing to go to another round of military attrition. I think this is the stick which the Israelis are trying to do it, but they didn't know exactly how far the Palestinians are steadfastness on their rights.
Okay, political analyst Dr. Suhail Al-Natur, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
As Palestinian and Israeli negotiators prepare to resume indirect talks on reaching a permanent ceasefire deal in Cairo, Gazans have found temporary respite in the current truce, but remain wary of what the future holds, as the lull in Israeli aggression allows them to inspect their losses.
Residents from Gaza City have been experiencing some cautious calm as the 5-day ceasefire takes hold. But for thousands displaced by the brutal Israeli aggression, the respite is only temporary. Some took advantage of the lull in the fighting to restock on food.
The situation is better during the ceasefire. We can go anywhere. But if they start talking about ending the ceasefire, people will start worrying again and feel bad.
The ceasefire was renewed on Thursday for another 5 days, after a previous truce expired. It has largely halted more than a month of Israeli violence that has claimed the lives of almost 2,000 Palestinians. In a UN-run school sheltering the displaced, Gazans were waiting as they remembered the anger, the sadness and the pain of leaving their homes.
When you are forced to leave your house, you get angry and feel sad. It's painful. And on top of this, we were attacked by Israeli airplanes.
According to the United Nations, at least 425,000 out of the 1.8 million people in the Gaza Strip have been displaced by the war, living in emergency shelters or staying with host families. The Israeli war on Gaza has devastated the Strip's fragile economy, left hundreds jobless and flattened factories, adding to Palestinian woes.
Around 400 to 450 employees worked in this factory. Now they have lost their jobs. Since the factory was demolished, these workers are now unemployed.
Palestinian businessman Mohammed Al-Talabani says he has lost around $25 million as a result of the Zionist aggression after the Israelis destroyed his profitable ice cream factory. His Al-Auda factory was a family business that provided employment for hundreds of Palestinians in Gaza's Deir al-Balah.
This is a catastrophe. 450 workers lost their jobs. Where should we go? We are unemployed. For the past 7 years, there is unemployment in Gaza.
The war has added to Gaza's economic hardship. The jobless number, which stood at 40% before the war started in July, has soared with the destruction of businesses. Gaza's Chamber of Commerce estimates that 500 businesses have been struck by Israeli bombs and shells since fighting began on July 8. Officials said businesses affected by the fighting were in the food, farming, building materials and plastic sectors. Now Palestinians hope that donors will make good on their aid pledges and that the brutal Israeli war machine will be brought to a halt once and for all.
You're watching Al Ittijah World News. Still to come. Turkey's ruling party favors Davutoglu as new prime minister. Welcome back. Our top stories are: Iraqi warplanes bomb ISIS militants' positions in the northeastern city of Tel Afar as Kurdish troops recapture the eastern side of the Mosul Dam. The Syrian army launches a wide-scale operation against Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups in the Qalamun region, killing and injuring scores. And Palestinian and Israeli delegations return to Cairo to continue indirect talks in an effort to reach a long-term ceasefire agreement. Tens of thousands of opposition supporters, led by former cricketer turned politician Imran Khan and cleric Muhammad Tahir al-Qadri, have converged on the Pakistani capital Islamabad for what is being billed as an extended protest movement to oust Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's government.
Following a day of violent clashes with police, two massive anti-government movements have entered the Pakistani capital, presenting the 15-month-old civilian government with its biggest challenge yet. The two cavalcades, which were loosely allied but operated separately, arrived in Islamabad in the pouring rain at the end of a slow and occasionally violent journey across the Punjab province. The protests are the most potent threat yet to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's government, which has also been dogged by tensions with the military high command. Opposition leader and former cricketer Imran Khan hopes that by bringing a large crowd into central Islamabad, he can force Sharif, whom he accuses of vote rigging, to resign and hold new elections.
I will come here again tomorrow and will spend nights and will stay here until Nawaz Sharif resigns. We don't accept a prime minister who has won and appointed after rigid elections.
Mass street movements are an integral part of democratic politics in Pakistan, often used by opposition politicians to press their demands. But Khan's crusade has been met with sharp criticism in the news media in recent weeks from Pakistanis, who say his demands are exaggerated, especially at a time of pressing security challenges. The strength of the protests is likely to become clearer over the weekend, once the crowds reach full strength and the two protest leaders address their followers. Populist cleric Tahir al-Qadri's team said he would demand Sharif's immediate arrest and the installation of a new government led by technocrats. Nawaz Sharif's government has tried to appear strong in the face of mounting pressure. After initially banning the protests, it said they could go ahead, but not in the symbolically important area before the national parliament. Experts foresee that any attempt by protesters to move towards the parliament could set off violent clashes with police in a country already suffering from social and economical problems, as well as an insurgency movement that poses security challenges to the 180 million strong country.
The Ebola outbreak has so far claimed more than 1,100 lives in Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, and Nigeria, with health experts revealing that they are struggling to contain West Africa's deadly disease.
It's the world's worst ever outbreak. The Ebola virus has already killed most of its victims. The UN says more than 1,000 people have died and hundreds more have been infected. The medical charity Medicine, MSF, has warned that if the situation in Liberia is not contained, then the region will never be stabilized. MSF, which employs doctors in some of the world's most difficult conditions, has struggled to help control the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. The World Health Organization has allowed the use of experimental drugs to fight the outbreak. A vaccine developed in a lab in Canada is about to be sent to West Africa. The Canadian government is donating between 800 and 1,000 doses of the vaccine, which has only been tested on animals.
To make whatever
However, that's still not enough to fight the virus. Sierra Leone President Ernest Bai Koroma called on the World Health Organization to do more to fight the deadly outbreak.
This is a call we are now making to the world because we need treatment centers, and in the treatment centers you need clinicians that requires specialized training. We don't have that. We need nurses that require specialized training. We don't have that.
Liberia has received a small quantity of the experimental drug ZMapp to treat infected patients. There are no more supplies available. Drastic measures have been taken to stop the spread. Guinea, where the outbreak began, has closed its borders with Sierra Leone and Liberia. The death toll from the deadly virus in the region currently stands at more than 1,068. There have been 1,975 confirmed or probable cases, and with the virus spreading, many fear the number of cases will inevitably continue to rise.
Turkey's ruling AK party is still considering who will replace President-elect Recep Tayyip Erdogan as Prime Minister, with all eyes on Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu as the likely replacement.
The Turkish government is on the brink of a major reshuffle as Recep Tayyip Erdogan prepares to step down as Prime Minister and move to the presidency following his victory in the August 10 presidential elections. Erdogan and the Justice and Development Party are engrossed in the transition to a presidential system. They have major hurdles to overcome before this can happen, starting with finding an individual to replace Erdogan as the AKP head without causing a debilitating power struggle in the party. Erdogan has announced that the Central Executive Board will elect his replacement as party chairman and Turkey's next prime minister on August 21st. Nevertheless, the AK party's executive board has not made an official announcement of a candidate, while sources from the AK party say that the executive committee and the majority of the deputies reach a consensus on Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu as the most likely candidate. The next premier will wield all the country's executive powers, as the AK party attempts to make the necessary constitutional changes into a presidential republic.
I said before that the presidential elections would be the starting gun for the 2015 elections. Our target should be to acquire at least a majority to establish the new constitution. I don't believe that we will compromise on this.
Erdogan's last year in office was marred with corruption charges against his government and widespread dissent and violence against his policies. Erdogan managed to secure 52% of the vote in presidential elections. However, it will be an uphill battle for the outgoing prime minister to gain a majority in parliament ahead of next year's general elections.
And joining us to discuss this further is Dr. Erkan Saka, professor at Belgi University. Dr. Saka, will Ahmet Davutoglu gain the majority needed to become prime minister?
Yes. Probably he will he's the most likely candidate. And also it seems that in the last terms, Erdogan prefers people who are very loyal to him. So in a way, Davutoglu proved to be a very loyal person in the government. So he might be the next one. And of course, we are going towards sort of de facto presidential system. So now the person who will be in the prime minister position will not be that autonomous, but loyal to the president, it seems.
And considering his history as a foreign minister, will he be suitable for the job as a prime minister?
Can I get that again, the question?
Considering his history as a foreign minister, will he be suitable? Will he be up for the job as prime minister?
Can I get the last question again?
Will Ahmet Davutoglu be suitable for the job as prime minister, considering his previous stances as a foreign minister? Will he be suitable? Will he be up for the job as prime minister?
Yes, I mean, critics, of course, are not really do not like his performance as a foreign minister. But as I say now, I think the most important issue is to be loyal, and so I think he showed his loyalty to Erdogan, and of course he's still a respectable person in many circles. So he might suit it, but he acts like more like an ideologue than a real prime minister. I feel like there will still be some problems. Prime ministry is not really suitable for a person who is acting like an ideologue, an organic intellectual.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today, Dr. Erkan Sakader, professor at Belgi University. Now, Moscow has vehemently denied a Ukrainian report suggesting Kiev has destroyed a number of Russian military vehicles that allegedly crossed into eastern Ukraine. Now, this as Kiev authorities continued to prevent a convoy of Russian humanitarian aid from reaching the rest of eastern regions.
Russia's defense ministry has dismissed a Kiev report claiming to have destroyed a Russian military column, which allegedly crossed into Ukraine, saying that no such column ever existed and that such claims were based on fantasies or the assumptions of journalists. Moscow's comments come shortly after Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko announced that his country's artillery had destroyed a significant number of Russian military vehicles that allegedly crossed into Ukraine on Thursday night. Reports of the alleged incident had appeared in several Ukrainian and Western media outlets and had triggered a chorus of criticism from Western and NATO officials. Earlier on Friday, Russia's security service also denied the report, instead asserting that border guards have been deployed to provide security near the frontier, but insisted that they only operate on the Russian side. As the fallout over the alleged military column snowballed, Ukraine's foreign minister announced he would meet his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Berlin on Sunday for talks alongside French and German diplomats. This as Russia's foreign ministry ominously accused Ukraine of attempts to derail the supply of humanitarian aid, as doubts swirled over what would happen next to almost 300 Russian aid trucks parked up some 30 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The Kremlin has accused Kiev of stepping up military operations in eastern Ukraine with the obvious goal of blocking the aid from entering the country. The latest episode between Ukraine and Russia has caused tensions to reach dangerous levels, further distancing any signs of a resolution to the crisis plaguing the region.
Riot police have clashed with dozens of protesters in the U.S. town of Ferguson in the state of Missouri as tensions continue to rise over the shooting of a black teenager by police. Several stores were looted and bottles thrown in the area of a convenience store, shown in CCTV footage released by police to show that 18-year-old Michael Brown was a robbery suspect. The footage appears to show Mr. Brown stealing and intimidating the owner. The killing has sparked days of angry clashes between police and protesters. Now, 2 boat migrants have died among almost 1,500 rescued by Italian authorities in the last 24 hours. The total number of migrants who have arrived in Italy this year has hit a record 100,000. Italy's Interior Minister Angelino Alfano said he was proud to be saving lives of migrants, but reiterated Rome's position that the burden of patrolling the sea and saving migrants from Africa's shores must be taken over the EU border agency Frontex. Now, a reminder of our top stories. Iraqi warplanes bomb ISIS militants' positions in the northeastern city of Tal Afar as Kurdish troops recapture the eastern side of the Mosul Dam. The Syrian army launches a wide-scale operation against Al-Qaeda-affiliated groups in the Qalamun region, killing and injuring scores. And Palestinian and Israeli delegations return to Cairo to continue indirect talks in an effort to reach a long-term ceasefire agreement. That's it for today. Have a good night.